The Mirage IIIE is a French tier 6 fighter and is most commonly referred to as the French Dorito. But what's the performance of a Dorito-shaped plane like? Well, that's what we'll take a look at now. It has a pretty good top speed, but you'll have trouble accelerating past 1350 km per hour. The stall speed is a bit high, which might be a slight issue when dogfighting planes with a lower stall speed. As long as you avoid going vertical, you should be fine. The optimal speed on the other hand is pretty high and is almost impossible to maintain. That's because of your delta wing, which makes you bleed a lot of speed. Trying to lose as little speed as possible is the best thing you can do in this thing, because your thrust to weight ratio isn't the greatest and it will take some time for you to regain all of your lost energy. The turn rate itself is pretty good, it won't cause you any problems until you're slow. At these lower speeds you still turn well enough to dogfight some people, but if someone tries to third party you, you won't be able to do much. And finally, the roll rate. It's once again pretty good, so it won't cause you any major problems. The offensive armament consists of 2 guns and 4 different missiles. The guns are the 30mm Def 5.52s with 250 rounds when maxed. These guns are present on both tier 5 French fighters, so you probably already got used to them. The rate of fire is decent, which means you'll quickly run out of ammo if your aim is poor. Trigger patience is very important if you don't want to wait 30 seconds to reload your guns. These guns also deal a lot of damage, so in most cases a short burst is enough to disassemble an enemy plane. The best ammo belt you can use is the air targets belt. You also get a decent variety of missiles and 60 countermeasures, 30 flares and 30 chaff. This amount shouldn't cause any problems, as most missiles in this tier are easy to flare with the exception of the M9P5 and the radar missiles, which obviously can't be flared. The only stock missile this plane gets is the M9B, the most basic missile in this game. It has a caged rear aspect infrared heat seeker, which means you can only get an infrared lock on people if you are behind them. This missile should only be used if you have absolutely no upgrade points. The max G pull of 10 means the enemy can easily outturn the missile if they have enough energy to do so, of course. The flare resistance is very low, so if you know an enemy is looking around themselves and actively flaring, you shouldn't be firing this missile. Targets that are maneuvering are also guaranteed misses, unless they're very slow. Despite having a gimbal, the seeker head cannot move around in it, meaning you'll need to be perfectly aligned with the enemy if you want to acquire a lock, which can be challenging if you're dogfighting someone. One of the better things of this missile is that it's relatively light, so it won't affect your performance too much. Overall, a very basic missile that you should completely avoid using. The first missile you can purchase with the upgrade points is the Magic 1, an uncaged rear aspect infrared heat-seeking missile. It's a very good upgrade from the M9B, having a high max G pull, a usable gimbal and radar slaving. It's still very flare hungry, so if you're trying to kill someone that has some situational awareness, there's a very high chance he'll flare it. Otherwise you can usually fire it in most situations where you acquire an infrared lock. Of course it shouldn't be fired from too close or too far away. My recommendations are anything between 0.5 and 3 km. Anything less or more has a higher chance of missing. Also don't expect it to pull insanely hard, so close high off-bar launches are not recommended. Another thing you should probably know is that this missile accelerates very quickly, which is useful because it gives the enemy less time to notice it and flare. Getting this missile is a must if you want to do somewhat well in this plane. The second missile you can purchase with upgrade points is the R530E, an uncaged, limited all-aspect infrared heat-seeking missile. But what does limited all-aspect even mean? Well, it means that the enemy has to fly pretty quickly if you want to acquire an infrared lock that isn't from rear aspect. So if the enemy is too slow, the missile won't be able to lock him, unless you're behind him. Then you won't have any problems as long as you're in range. The max G pull is not the greatest, so you'll want to use this missile at longer ranges where your Magic 1 can't reach. The booster gives it noticeably more range, but the R530E is much slower than the Magic 1. This allows the enemy to spot it in time and easily flare it. Unless you're perfectly aligned with the enemy, close range shots should be avoided, because the missile will have trouble pulling into the enemy. It should also be noted that you can only carry one at a time, so unless you're swimming in upgrade points, this missile isn't really worth getting. The only radar missile available for the Mirage IIIE is the R530. It's a radar version of the R530E and has the exact same performance. Only difference is that now you need to maintain a hard lock in order for it to hit the target. That's much easier said than done. The Mirage IIIE has a pulse radar, which is vulnerable to chaff and ground clutter. And the signal on this missile is also pulse, so all it takes is a couple chaff and your missile will go after it. If you plan on using this missile, only use it in head-ons, at ranges from 1.5 to 2 kilometers. Firing it from too far will give the enemy plenty of time to chaff. If you manage to encounter a chaffless plane, you can use this missile without any issues. Just make sure you don't fire it from too close, or it won't be able to pull into the target. Just like with the R530E, you can only carry one, so it's up to you to decide if it's even worth getting. On your screen you can see a couple recommended loadouts. If you don't have a certain combination, try to at least get the magic ones, and if you want to, you can get either R530. Moving on to the radar, the Mirage IIIE gets the Cyrano 2. This radar isn't really that good. It has decent range for tier 6 and a very large backdrop distance, which is how far the ground has to be behind an enemy to affect the radar lock. There's a high chance you won't be able to lock an enemy that's below you, which isn't too good if you're trying to use the R530. The search cone is abysmal. While the azimuth is average, the zenith is very small, only being able to scan targets 5 degrees above or below the aircraft's nose. If you don't know the meaning of what I just said, your radar can only scan a thin line on your screen. The RWR on this plane is the AN/ALR-45V. For this tier, it's a pretty good one, but to use it correctly, you will want to read the text displayed on your screen. Here's a quick summary of its playstyle. I've only written the essential stuff you need to know when flying the Mirage IIIE. The last thing I have to do is obviously place it on this tier list, and after gathering the thoughts of my community and combining them with my own, I'm putting it into A tier. Despite having good performance, you can only carry 3 very flare-hungry missiles that will surely get flared if the enemy is paying attention, leaving you with just your guns. It's still a good plane, but for a first tier 6 fighter, it might not be the best choice.